Hey everyone, welcome to the Cast and Spirit podcast. My name is John, and today I have my buddy Anthony Esposito. You can find him at Black Flag Fishing on Instagram. We've gone out fishing a couple weeks ago, had a good time, and I asked him to come on the podcast. And I really want to pick his brain because he's an amazing gear junkie, hoarder of gear, of fishing gear. He is probably the guru that I love to pick his brain on all the time. He's part of the Discord channel that we have with a couple pretty cool dudes. So if you're interested in that, I'll put that link in the show notes. But we're gonna have a little episode every day this week. We're gonna cover different topics around kayak fishing. So today we're gonna talk about fundamentals, things that Anthony, thinks every newbie should know if you're interested in getting into kayak fishing. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Anthony.
Hey, John, how you doing? I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited.
Awesome. So I want to learn, how did you figure out balance when it came to your first time getting your kayak and setting it up with all the gear? Because I could just imagine having all that gear and the fish finder and the bait tank just could be a little overwhelming compared to a regular kayak.
Okay, so the first time I figured out balance, I didn't figure out balance. I got in the kayak. I was out actually. So let me backtrack a little bit. I was just getting back into fishing, and it was about 3 years ago. I wanted to go out and go fishing. I was just doing the shore pounding thing, and my uncle invited me to come out and go fishing with him. He lives down in San Diego. He had a couple of kayaks. He said, "Hey, let's go. We'll go down and we'll fish for, just the stuff that we get in our bays, the usual suspects, spotted bay bass, halibut, stuff like that." So we get down there. We launched out of a park there in the south end of the bay. And I'm about, 5 feet deep, 4 feet deep. And he says, "Oh, I got to go back for something." And I went to turn the kayak around, and I leaned it because I noticed that as I leaned it, it would turn sharper, and I rolled right out of it. And that was the only time, knock on wood, that I've fallen out of a kayak. After that, I learned, okay, you got to keep your head in line with the kayak. Keep your torso and the front of the kayak aligned. Once you move off that center line, once your head is over either side of the kayak, you're going over. And so I think a big problem for a lot of people when they're getting started in kayaking is they think a wider kayak automatically means you're more stable. Not necessarily true. It might be more stable on flat water, but once you get into chop and swell, that kayak is going to want to stay parallel to the surface that you're on. And so if you go up on a big swell, that kayak's going to go up and it's going to tilt so that the bottom of that kayak stays on the same plane as that wave. You're going to have to counteract that by keeping your head basically straight up and down, if that makes sense. And so, in a narrower kayak, you kind of float along that wave rather than rotating with it. You kind of, I guess you could say, you're more perpendicular to the wave. Although it sounds weird, but I wish I could show you on video. But so that's really, as far as the fundamentals go for balance in a kayak, just keep your body in line with the kayak. Keep your head as if there's a string attached to your head. A lot of people talk about posture. If anybody's familiar with yoga, they say to imagine a string above your head and sit up straight. That's how you are in a kayak. You're not slouching. You're not leaning to the side. You're sitting up straight.
So that leads to the next question. Did you lose stuff when you fell over that first time? Did you lose all your gear?
So I got lucky. I didn't lose anything. I was able to recover everything, but everything that was in my tackle boxes was trashed. Hooks got rusted, lures got rusted. Everything that was in the kayak, even though it was in the tank well, it wasn't inside the kayak. It was just strapped inside the tank well, so it didn't fall out. But because it was submerged, it just got completely toasted.
Is that something that we have to kind of mentally be prepared for? Is that we're going to lose things?
Yes, absolutely. So if you listen to any form of media regarding kayak, you'll hear the phrase, dress to swim and plan to flip. Rig to flip, dress to swim, excuse me. So rigging to flip means that everything is tied down, everything is strapped down. Stuff that you don't want to get wet should be concealed, whether that's in a waterproof pocket on your life vest, whether it's in a waterproof pocket on your paddling pants, if it's in a hatch on your kayak. if it can get wet and destroyed, you don't want it to get wet. Conceal it somehow. As far as rods and reels go, obviously it's not optimal to have those concealed while you're out on the open water. But when you're launching, if you're dealing with any kind of surf or any kind of rough water, you're going to want to keep those tucked away or strapped down. Now, some kayaks will have a larger hatch inside. You can put everything inside the kayak. For those that don't have that, if they've only got a small hatch and you can't fit a long rod in them or something like that, just have it strapped down to the deck so that it's parallel with the deck, it's flat. And that way, if you do roll over, you don't have, essentially a long rod sticking off your kayak that's just going to break off when it hits the sand.
Now, say you don't fall in the water, like, am I to be is it to be expected that I will be getting wet even if I stay on the kayak?
For the most part, yeah, you're going to get wet. You're probably 6 inches from the surface when you're in the kayak. At least that's how high the gunnel is. And there's going to be splashes coming over the side. There's going to be splashes coming over the front. If you stick your nose through a wave, it's going to splash over you. It's definitely something that, don't go out there in jeans and a sweatshirt and all kinds of clothes, cotton, stuff that's going to get heavy when you're on the kayak. Absolutely don't do it. It's better to have fewer layers that'll dry fast and some type of a windbreaker or something like that that's not going to absorb water, and it's just going to keep the wind chill off of you. And if it's so cold that you need to have, if it's so cold that you need to be in a dry suit, either be in a dry suit or just don't go.
Oh, that makes sense. Now, switching a little bit into the talk about just the kayak itself, is there like a perfect beginner kayak, or are all kayaks kind of unique in their own special way? How do you go about that?
So I think all kayaks are unique in their own special way. I don't think there's one kayak that's perfect for every scenario, regardless of what you do. Living here in Southern California, obviously we have a ton of options. We have small bodies of water. We have bays. We have the open ocean. We have streams, rivers. There's any type of body of water you can imagine kayaking on, we have it. I don't think there's one single kayak that you could get that would excel at all of those, but I think that there's some kayaks out there that would, they would be suitable for all of those, if that makes sense. They might shine in one or two categories. It's kind of like, for those of you that are familiar with playing Madden when you were younger, you had the little polygon that would point at different areas where the player was good. That's kind of like your kayak. You know what I mean? You want something that's long and narrow and fast if you're going to be on the open ocean, as opposed to if you're going to be on a river, you probably want something that's maybe 60 or 70% as long as that open water kayak, so you can turn it on a dime. The longer the kayak is, the harder it is to turn. You probably want something a little bit wider if you're going to be on a river. It's just, there's different styles. But I will say that if you were a beginner and you were looking for a kayak, your first kayak, my biggest piece of advice would be try some kayaks out. You can rent them cheap. You can borrow them from buddies. You can usually reach out to a friend. If you're looking to get into kayaking, typically somebody who's into it. And if not, there's a Discord channel with a bunch of kayakers. You can get to know people there. You want to try some kayaks before you go and spend a bunch of money on one. I usually tell people that I recommend they go with a used kayak up front, because the Southern California market for kayaks is kind of different than a lot of other places. There's a couple of brands that are really prevalent here, and everything else has a very low resale value. So if you buy something new and it's expensive and you decide you don't like kayaking, you've got a pretty large upfront investment and you're probably not going to get a good return on it. If you go out and try a few kayaks out and then you go, you might buy a used one, paddle on it for 5 or 6 months, do a season on it, decide what you like about it, what you don't like about it. And then when you go to upgrade, you'll be much more secure, I guess you could say, in your purchase, because it's going to be something that you've already you sought that kayak out. You looked at the features you wanted, made sure you got them in the one you bought. And it's going to be more of a long-term investment than something you buy this year and sell next.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess to wrap it up, is there any special regulations outside of just fishing, the general fishing regulations, that somebody should know about? Like if a kayak is a certain length because you got a super long one, they need some kind of identifier number or something like that?
So there's a number of options on the market, like, a couple of I don't know if we use brand names, but Torqeedo, Bixby. Some people use an outboard or a trolling motor. All those things, if you've got a motor on your kayak, you are supposed to have a CF number and be registered with the DMV. If you don't, if it's not sail powered, if it's not motor powered, as far as I know, if it's just a human propulsion, a kayak that's propelled by either a paddle or pedals, I don't believe, as far as I know, that you have to register anywhere regardless of the length. Now, obviously check your local regulations. I'm not an expert on that, but I don't believe that I've ever heard of or seen or read anywhere that needs to be registered due to length.
Well, dude, I really appreciate these tips, and I hope you inspired a bunch of new kayak anglers to hit the water. If you guys want to find more information about Anthony, definitely hit him up on Instagram. I'll put his information in the show notes. And tomorrow, we're going to be talking about picking your first kayak. I know we touched a little bit upon it in this episode, but we're going to go in a deep dive tomorrow. So make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode. Tight lines, and I'll see you on the water. Hey, just one more thing before you go. Would you find it helpful to get a few fishing tips and tricks sent straight to your inbox? Well, if so, head over to castandspear.com/join and sign up for our weekly newsletter. Tight lines.